Okay. We are live for session number, session number 3?
3 or 4, yeah. 3.
Because we did 3 the first time, 2 the second time, and so this is the third time. We're doing 6 and 7 this time.
Yep.
Sorry, Jerry just texted me back. Okay. Tonight we're discussing the Garrison Commander and the wedding, which, of course, the wedding I think is the majority of everybody's favorite episode.
Oh, absolutely.
But there's some really intense stuff in Garrison Commander.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll start with Garrison Commander. Last episode ended off with the regiment, or not regiment, but the small squad coming up on Dougal and Claire by the riverside or by the waterside. And this lieutenant being able to finally say, you know, here I am backed up by my buddies, and this time I'm really going to ask and make sure everything's okay. So that was a cliffhanger last week, and we opened up right there. I mean, exactly right there on Garrison Commander. That's where we open up again. And, I mean, we find Claire tries to put them off and say, you know, everything's fine. I'm a guest. I'm not being, you know, detained. But this lieutenant insists on her speaking to his commander. Which I'm not sure why she actually decided she had to go with him.
I'm not either. I don't think that they could have made her.
Because they are on Mackenzie land. So to me, this was a little bit of a weakness between how they had it plotted in the book and how they decided to plot it in the show. So, because we know that in the book, Dougal delivered her to Randall. And here they were having to try and work around that. So and I found it a little bit of a weak plot point.
Yeah, I think that soldier, there were so many kind of looks back and forth in on the TV version between her and Dougal. I wonder if he truly believed her, and that's the reason that he kept insisting that she go, just in case, you know, she was being told to say that she was a visitor.
Yeah.
They kind of play it off like that.
Maybe. But like I said, for me, it was a little bit of a weak plot point as far as why she. So they end up back, you know, and there's voiceover there, and she talks about how even though these were British soldiers and not the same soldiers that she was used to being with, she felt like she was back among her people and on the ride back to, I can't remember the name of the village where they were going.
I don't either.
But anyway, they get back. Dougal has insisted on going with her. Basically, when I first watched it, the first time through, I felt like he was being chivalrous, you know, to protect her. And it wasn't until, you know, I'd watched it a couple more times, and it was like, oh, wait a minute. He was not being chivalrous. He was protecting his own backside because of the fact he realizes she knows that he's been raising funds for the Jack cause. So he's not letting her out of his sight back into the English when she's been trying to get away from them since they decided to keep her. So, yeah, I mean, it took me a couple of watches to be like, oh, well, wait a minute. He's not a good guy. he's not even. This is not even a redeeming quality.
I think that he has a little bit of chivalry, but I think that his own interests far outweigh that. Like he'd do anything just to protect himself. But if he can be chivalrous in the process of it, then he's okay with that.
Well, the thing about Dougal is that I do believe Dougal is very much a patriot, as far as he very much believes in the Jacobite cause.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not so much protecting, I don't think it's protecting his own interest, I think it's protecting the interest of the cause. And therefore, and thereby protecting the Clan Mackenzie. Because if people found out that he was raising funds, then that could end up coming back on the clan and cause the clan all sorts of problems.
Yes.
So, anyway, we get Claire to the garrison, and Lieutenant Foster, or as one of the podcasters called him, Lieutenant Babyface.
Yeah.
Takes her up to meet, I think it's a general, where a group of soldiers are having dinner, and this general, I don't know, the way these men jumped up and almost fell all over themselves when he brought her in, it was, I don't know how truly, I don't know, maybe I'm being really picky. And maybe it was supposed to be that way because they've made that English general almost a buffoon,
Yes. Maybe it had been a long time since they had seen a British woman. That's just the way I took it. They were all really excited just to be in the presence of one.
Yeah, it was, like I said, I was really like, what? Wait a minute. Has it really been that long?
Well, men, doesn't take too long.
Yeah. But yeah, there was some definite, the way they treated Dougal, it was one of those things that was just cringeworthy.
Yeah.
For being supposedly the civilized, part of that whole dynamic there. It was so blatantly, I don't know, so blatantly biased and bigoted, and it just, I was just kind of like, oh, it's so unbelievably rude.
Yeah.
It's one thing for them to have been saying that behind, in their own little group. But the fact that he felt like he could say it straight to Dougal's face, and almost like he felt like he wasn't going to understand him.
Yeah, like
that was definitely showing the British in a fairly bad light.
Yeah. Yeah, that was hard to watch. You had a little bit. I felt really sorry for Dougal at that point because you could tell he wanted to choke him, but he knew that he couldn't. He knew his hands were tied. If he had done one thing there, they would have arrested him. So, that would have gotten neither him nor Claire anywhere. So
yeah, I find it hard to reconcile the fact that they are supposed to be, a civilized, when they're calling the Scots, these uncivilized barbarians.
Yeah.
So, it's just so hypocritical. And I'm sure that's the way it was supposed to come across to us. It was supposed to engender sympathy for the Scots and their cause by showing the British most of the British being so anti-Scot and treating them and thinking of them and treating them so poorly.
And I think probably truly in that time period, there were a lot of prejudice on we only got one side of it, and you know, in the show, but there were prejudices on both sides. The Scots thought really ill of the British and had their reasons, and the British thought really ill of the Scots and had their reasons. But yeah, that was really hard. That was hard for me to watch. I just cringeworthy, like you said.
Yeah. But then, of course, we get Claire sitting at dinner with them and talking and looking like she's absolutely charming everybody. And then into the midst of this comes clumping Blackjack Randall.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, watching it again, I just watched it again this evening, and I was really struck by the looks, just no words between he and Claire, just the looks the two exchanged were so loaded with undercurrent, and you could just feel the, you know, almost a loathing from Claire, and the suspicion and doubt, and also almost glee from Randall that she's now here and he can get his hands back on her. And it was all done with no dialogue between the two of them. You know, we got all of that with just these looks that were exchanged between them.
Yeah, superb.
Yeah. And then we got a little bit of, I felt like we got a little bit of scenery chewing from Tobias being Blackjack, and a couple of things, you know, the whole going outside and stamping off and coming back in was just a little bit, I mean, I didn't really expect that kind of stuff from Blackjack, who always seemed a little bit, I don't know, I don't want to say more refined, because he's not. Because when we met him, his actions were not those of a refined, you know, gentleman. But and maybe it's the whole soldier thing, you know. Amongst soldiers, they wouldn't show themselves as gentlemen to each other. Maybe, I don't know.
I think he normally tries to come off really poorly. And really composed. And he was in a hurry. He burst through the door, and he was talking about what was he talking about? Seeing some, was there a little skirmish or something that had taken place? And
well, I don't remember exactly what he came in to report. Because the general asked, "Are we under attack?" And he said, "No, we're not."
He seemed to have been bumfuzzled.
There was something oh, no, he came up because Dougal was downstairs. That's what it was. He came into the tap room downstairs, and Dougal was sitting down there. So I don't know what the big thing was about Dougal being, you know, downstairs in, basically this was a Scottish pub. Or, you know, inn or whatever. So I'm not exactly sure, unless they're super suspicious and he's been, I don't know. But that was, now that I think about it, that's what it was. He was coming in to alert the general that Dougal Mackenzie was downstairs. So, and that was, then that whole exchange of looks happened between he and Claire. So, and then of course, you know, Claire lets her mouth run away with her, even though she had herself, you know, she'd had herself all set. She was going to get out of there. Lieutenant Babyface was going to escort her to Inverness. It was going to be an easy trip. She was going to be able to get back to the damn Stones and get out of there. And then she lets her, you know, her hot-headed mouth run away with her. And immediately makes every man in that room super suspicious. and turns them against her. I mean, turns that the general had been totally on her side until she voiced sympathy for the Scots.
Mm-hmm. I think Blackjack standing by that window in that scene kind of baited her too.
Oh, he absolutely baited her. I mean, he was working to try and get her to say something. I mean, even though just before that started happening, the general had suggested that Captain Randall escort her to Inverness so that she could tell her tale to him. And I'm sure, you know, it was one of those things where he didn't want to have to be responsible for taking her to Inverness. He wanted to have a reason to keep her there. So that whole baiting to try and get her to betray herself or to betray the people that she'd been with for all those, because he was flat out rude and inappropriate in his comments to her. So once again, showing himself to be less than a gentleman.
Yes.
You know? And then we get somebody bursting in talking about how there'd been an attack and they were dead and injured. And of course, it's Claire to the rescue because they can't find the surgeon, which I found hard to believe. They just let her run downstairs and jump right in, you know?
Yeah.
Except there's that force of personality where she's definitely acting like she knows what's going on and knows what to do and doesn't, you know, is acting rather than telling people what to do. She's doing it and then getting people to kind of work with her. So it's that whole, again, it's a force of personality, I think. And then we get a definite callback to that opening scene. The very opening scene of Sassenach, or not the opening scene, but the opening picture of her as Nurse Beecham.
Yes.
Dealing with the soldier with the spurting artery. And
yeah,
so,
I believe in the opening scene it was a leg, and then in this one I think it was an arm right above the elbow, I think.
Yeah, and showing us, you know, the barbarism of medical care as far as what passed for medical care of the time, and just hacking that limb off.
You can definitely see why so many just shock or infection.
Yeah, if they didn't die of their wounds or blood loss, then shock, and then later on infection, of course. We're gonna get them.
Yeah.
So, and then, you know, after that, we get a little break, and then she's back upstairs to this empty room with just Blackjack and his aide, with the aide shaving him, and we get that flashback to her and Frank.
To where she's shaving him,
Yeah, and the shaving set. Which is a nice scene, but I'm so not a Frank fan.
No.
No.
He's kind of a weak personality.
Yeah, and I think it may be that a lot of that opinion is based on our knowledge of his character on down the road.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
But it is a way for them to remind us that there's still Frank, you know, she's got these wonderful memories, and she's still, you know, her goal is still to get back to Frank.
Yeah, it keeps him relevant.
Yeah, and present in the story.
Yeah.
And then we get I had forgotten how tense this exchange was between the two of them. The whole you know, one-on-one conversation between the two of them in that room for the length of time that it was just the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that exchange, I mean, it was, and I looked at it and thought that, you know, realized it was, you know, beautifully shot and masterfully blocked as far as keeping us interested in what was going on, even though it was just the two of them talking.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, unfortunately, we get that flashback to the action, you know, his side of the whipping of Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
Second time that he was lashed.
Yeah, I think it kept my interest because the way that it was shot, you would get these headshots of each of them, and each of them had this depth of emotion on their faces, and so it's like we were just part of their conversation. And even though it was just the two of them in the room, and the setting was just a room, we didn't get to like look at the Scottish countryside or anything like that. But just the depth of emotion when they were talking just kept me riveted to what are they going to say next. And then, it went from him being so almost like it was almost like he was sorry for things that he had done. And then all of a sudden it was like a light switch came on and you saw this change in his demeanor. And yeah, it was. I thought it was really, really good. Headshots and really good acting.
Yeah, very, very well done, because he was totally playing her. As far as I'm concerned, he was totally playing her the entire time. Because he was playing her, and they had him playing us, the audience.
Yep.
Because we're getting it from her POV, so we're getting pulled along right with him, thinking, oh, maybe there is some redeeming character to this man. Maybe he does have regrets for the way he's acted and the things he's done in the past, and that he doesn't really want to, that he can blame it all on having been a soldier in battle, and it having scarred him and turned him into this, monstrous man.
Yeah.
Right up into the point when, we see his glee when he punches her right in the stomach. Because he does it with such relish. And calling in his aide and and basically doing his best to corrupt this young aide of his.
Who looks scared to death of him, by the way. That young guy, when he was shaving him, and then when he came back into the room, you could tell that young man knew of his reputation and had maybe had dealings with him before, because he was scared to death of him.
You had to wonder how many other aides that Captain Randall has had, who, for one reason or another have not lasted. And because this guy seems fairly new to him. So yeah, he did look completely intimidated and totally terrified of him.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, even though I knew that punch was coming, it was still a shock.
Yeah, it's almost like you felt emotionally punched yourself just watching it, because like you said, he had kind of carried us along, and especially if you haven't read the books, you would be carried along with this roller coaster of emotions, and all of a sudden to get punched, and it's like an emotional punch.
Yeah, well, even though I read the book, I was thinking to myself, I can't believe they're going to change his character this much. I can't believe they are writing his character and trying to make him sympathetic to us. I was mad at the writers up until that punch. and all of the dialogue that followed that punch, because I was thinking to myself, oh my God, they're going to change his character so much that they're trying to make him, they're trying to make us feel sorry for him.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I knew that there's that change, but they, like I said, they've done it different in this show in the episode than they did in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was confrontational from the very beginning in the book, because she was delivered into his hands by Dougal.
Yes.
Sorry, I think the dog is chasing a bug. His tag is dragging all over the floor. But yeah, I mean, we get him trying to corrupt his corporal,
mm-hmm.
and forcing him into kicking Claire, and then finally, we get Dougal bursting in to save the day. Dougal mm-hmm. is the hero of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
To save the day and carry her off, and his whole, she's a guest of the Clan Mackenzie. You can't have her. Yeah. She's still under my protection, blah, blah, blah. So he gets her out of there,
mm-hmm.
and rides off to the St. Indian Spring,
mm-hmm.
where we get the whole, her drinking, and then him questioning her, and then him saying, well, if you had been lying to me, I believe you now that you're not a spy, because if you'd been lying to me, you would have dropped dead or whatever it was, because you drunk mm-hmm. from this spring.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like, really, Dougal? Dougal has that kind of a belief system? Does he really believe that? Or was he just looking for an excuse to be able to implement the plan that he's implementing and having her marry Jamie?
I think he totally believed it. I think that he totally believed in the superstitions, because those superstitions were rampant during those times. And, he said that was the liar spring, and it was a sulfur spring. And if you were to drink from that and then found untrue, it would burn your throat out. And I'm thinking, of course, from a medical background, I'm like, those poor people, the ones who died, have a sulfur allergy. Yeah. They have a sulfur allergy, and they died, and everybody thought they were liars.
Well, it's the whole thing about, putting a woman in a sack with rocks and dropping her in the spring, and if she drowned, she wasn't a witch. If she floated, she was, a witch, but if she drowned, she wasn't a witch, but oops, she's dead. So guess she wasn't a witch, but now she's dead. So, it's like, please.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of think he was looking for an excuse to be able to marry her to Jamie. Oh, my DVR turned off. Sorry. To marry her to Jamie, which would effectively take Jamie out of the running and out of competition for the lairdship of Clan Mackenzie.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's super canny, super wily, mm-hmm. and it would also keep her more under his control, as far as never being able to go back to the English and say, oh, by the way, I did see Dougal Mackenzie raising funds for the Jacobites, and
mm-hmm.
which would put the entire clan at risk.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I personally think he was knowing that it wasn't, that it wasn't going to burn her throat out, but he could say that that's the reason I believe you.
Mm-hmm. And it could be. I was thinking during the scene, when we talk about the superstitions, Colum is a very intelligent, canny man as well, but he still had the superstition of the Black Kirk. You know, so I think that their superstitions are so woven. Well, and Jamie harkens to that too. You know, when they were at the Black Kirk, he is, framed in that window, and he said, you know, I'm a an educated man. I had a tutor, but I also want, I also don't want to anger, in so many words, the devil in his own kirkyard. And so I think that even their intelligence, those superstitions are so ingrained in them that it could have been either way, but I tend to believe that he might have totally believed that.
Yeah. Maybe. I guess I'm giving him more benefit of the doubt as far as erring on the side of logic and
Mm-hmm.
the
It's definitely a
scientific
good
world.
plan.
Yeah. Because when she finds out that, his plan is to marry her to a Scot so that he has legal precedent for not having to turn her over. Because he's been thinking about this all along, because she says, "You've been talking to Ned Gowan."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Yes, you're right, I have." So it's been a plan of his for a while to marry her to a Mackenzie, and it could be. I mean, again, from the book, I think there was a possibility that she could have married Rupert.
Yeah. That would have been interesting. The wedding,
Yeah.
the whole wedding episode
Oh.
might have been totally different.
So, but this way, like I said, Dougal was able to kill two birds with one stone.
Mm-hmm.
And again, in the book, there were also more political reasons to marry her to Jamie, even if they did end up doing away with Jamie, which could still happen, because then that would make she would inherit Lallybroch, which in the book, Lallybroch was much more strategic.
Yes.
In its placement as far as being at the opening of some kind of a pass that made it a very strategic land hold. So, she was still gonna, even if marrying her to Jamie could only be a temporary thing, because Jamie may not be around, all that long.
Jamie did have a bad habit of getting caught.
Yeah.
So even a cat only has 9 lives. So,
which is interesting if you think about it. In later books, that's actually a thing. So
yeah, I wonder, in the book. It's been a little while since I read that part. Did Lallybroch also, wasn't it close to or adjoining to Dougal's wife's property, the property where his wife was? Wasn't it like right at the edge of the Mackenzie land?
I thought it was in between. I can't, for some reason, I'm thinking it was adjoined to Cameron Land. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and read it again.
Yeah.
Because it's not even mentioned in the TV show.
No.
So, but I do know that it's a distance. It's quite a distance from Leoch.
Yes. Yeah, and that's one reason Jenny had never even been to Leoch.
Yeah.
I think we found that out later, but yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we get Claire reading the marriage contract that he just happened to have already executed for her to read. So this plan has been waiting for implementation for a while.
Yep.
For that to have already been, written out, to have a document written out. And then we get the famous scene between she and and Jamie about her making sure, her thinking that he wanted to be with Leary, and him saying no, he wasn't promised, that he wasn't a good prospect for marriage, and then her asking, doesn't it bother you that I'm not a virgin? And his response, then no, as long as it doesn't bother you that I am, which, you know, I think is probably a favorite little moment for a bunch of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked it. And I liked how he kind of sheepishly looked back to make sure that no one else could hear that conversation, because they had just been pushing and tormenting Willie, you know,
at the beginning.
about the same thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then I love Claire's response, you know, come stomping up the hill, grabbing the bottle of whiskey and going off.
Yeah.
And again, the look on Jamie's face like, oh, well, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, which that took us to the end of the episode. And that was kind of how we ended, was her off. We know she's off somewhere drinking, as is her wont to do.
Yes. Yes. And in one of the first scenes of the next, or sometime during the wedding, we see exactly how much she drank in that day or night, however long of a time period. It was only it wasn't even a whole day, was it? Because they were supposed to deliver her like in 3 days or something. So.
Yeah. Well, in the show, it was like the next day.
Okay.
In the book, it was like 3 days.
Okay.
Because they had 3 days in the book. But get out of there. Sorry, the dogs are in the cat box. But yeah, they were supposed to take her the next day. So by the next sundown, they had to be married.
Wow.
So they were doing all of this stuff over the course of hours, which was hard to believe. Some of the stuff that they managed to accomplish over the course of hours was a little far-fetched, but so anyway, we're in the wedding now, and the fact that they opened up that episode with Claire and Frank. We opened up that episode back in, that's like probably 1938 or 37, somewhere in there. With them, you know, walking down the street, and Frank basically popping the question, saying, let's get married right now.
Yeah, they were on their way to dinner. I think she was going to meet his family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't, this may be a sidetrack, but the dress that Claire had on in that scene, wasn't that a dress that had kind of been sketched? It was either Diana's mom or Claire's grandmother, Katrina's grandmother. I read somewhere when they were doing an article about the costuming that dress had significance, either the actress's grandmother had worn a dress like that. It was a little bit of a personal, you know, kind
I
of.
remember. I'm thinking it was Kat, but I'd have to hunt that back down again.
Yeah, I just thought that was really interesting how between that and them putting Diana in the series and little cameos, it's been kind of cool. I've enjoyed that.
So yeah, and we get, and I don't know if they did this to, it's funny, they kept wanting to bring Frank in to this series, but this particular way that they brought him in, I didn't think reflected well on him at all. You know, deciding that let's get married right now, and let's not do a big wedding, and I don't care what my family thinks. I don't want my family there. It was so rushed, and I don't know. I'm not sure it showed him in the best light.
Yeah, I think, well, I know my grandmother and grandfather married just prior to World War II, and they eloped. But my great grandparents were not waiting at a restaurant to meet them for dinner. That was just what floored me. It's just kind of a disrespectful. Um, it's disrespectful to have your parents waiting. I can't imagine that that's a quick 2-minute ceremony. The poor judge had just got finished doing one. They were still taking a picture on the courtroom steps. So
Yeah, well, like I said, I just thought it was rushed, and the whole thing. I know it's a whole time period thing, but the whole thing about wanting to introduce her as Mrs. Frank Randall, to where, she's no longer an individual, she is an appendage to him, which I thought it was significant in the way that Jamie was toasting her as Claire Fraser, to where she still had her own identity. She had just become part of his clan. To me, that I read it that way.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, but again, that's that 1930s, social, the whole society, as far as 1930s women were defined by their husbands, their husbands and their children. So, but then to go from that to you may now kiss your bride, and it being Claire and Jamie. And I was one of those that went, wait a minute, where's the damn wedding?
Yeah.
There's all that lead up to the wedding and the dress.
And the dress. Well,
you know what? It wasn't so much her dress, because there was no big thing about her dress. They changed that, because in the book, the whole thing about the splendor of someone in their wedding finery, it was Jamie and her being stunned by him in his whole, Scotsman regalia from head to toe. And when him standing out there, and suddenly the sun was shining. And that was her talking, that was Claire talking about Jamie, not Jamie talking about Claire, as it became, later in the episode. So, that whole thing where Ron says they changed it because of him honoring Terry, I'm just kind of like, no, that was in the book. You just took it from it being Jamie to being Claire. So again, I kind of felt like it was Ron Moore and some of the men's way to diminish Jamie a little bit.
Possibly.
I always feel like they've kind of diminished his character a little bit. They call him the King of Men, but yeah, they've taken away a number of the elements that made him the character that he was in the books. The fact that we knew how very educated he was, and how extremely intelligent he was, and how extremely religious and devout he was. His religion is a big part of Jamie in the book, and it's nowhere in the series.
Yeah. If you read the books, you can see little glimmers of it in the series. But if you didn't read the books, you had no idea.
There are things that Sam has put in to try and keep that character. But yeah, they've really, like I said, I feel like they've really kind of diminished his character a little bit. And they've given all of that to Claire. They have boosted her character so much to make her this iconic female protagonist that I feel like they've almost second fiddled Jamie to her. And I don't know, maybe this new season it'll be a little more equal, but the clips we're getting in the trailer sure seem like she's the one with all the ideas and pushing the whole thing.
And then he's just following through with it.
Yeah, he's along for the ride and doing what she's telling him to do. So I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, I was one of those that was like, wait a minute, I want to see what the hell's going on. And so I did. It took me a little bit. Took me watching it a couple of times to get to where I really liked the structure, as far as telling it in little bits of flashback, so that we didn't get all of this big lead up to the wedding itself. Because in actuality, it made the intimate moments in this episode that much more effective, I think. Where I think if they had just done it in a linear format, that it would have diminished the impact of the 3 times of the sex.
Yeah, I think so too. With them doing it in flashbacks, it's almost like we got to be in that room reliving how they were feeling in the moments of the wedding versus just seeing the wedding as a part of the movie or as a part of the show. You got to actually almost like relive the thought processes and the feelings that they were having during that ceremony and immediately afterwards.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like it really enhanced and it took us right along with how the intimate moments changed. How the first one was basically just the consummation. The first time they had sex was just the consummation, just getting it over with, because they knew they had to do it so that everybody knew that the deed was done. And then we kind of, get a little bit more back and forth between the two of them. But we got the big long story where she, the almost kiss, and then tell me about your family. And I like the fact that we got her talking about him and telling us about his character and why she, kind of showing us that how she was falling under his spell, to be able to become a little bit more enamored of Jamie the person, as opposed to her only real friend or ally throughout this whole ordeal that she's had going on.
I think she, as a character, liked it too, that, Jamie had this whole huge, long family and all these stories and all this history, because, when she said, tell me about your family, he kind of laughed and was like, well, how many generations back? And her being raised by her uncle and her parents dying when she was little, she doesn't have that. She doesn't have that big family background that he does. And I think she truly enjoys in the show, and I believe in the books as well, that she truly enjoys hearing all these stories of his family members, because she doesn't have that kind of history.
Well, and I mean, there is that whole train of thought that one of the big themes of these books is Claire looking for her place and looking for a community to belong to, community/family to belong to. So this is, her hearing that she's now a part of this incredible legacy of, the Mackenzies and the Frasers, and how all of these people are related to each other and how far back they go. And so it's her chance to, kind of start realizing that she, very well could be part of this family, although she's still, in her back of her mind, she's still wanting to get home.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that has never been her home. You know, she never really had a true home anywhere.
Yeah. And I think truly once she stops fighting that, she realizes that with Jamie is where she truly belongs. Just that was her, even though that was a totally different time period, that was where her soul was meant to be. That's where that was home to her.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie is her home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, because it's not, as we find out, you know, this next season, it's not necessarily Scotland that is her, and that clan that is her community. It's Jamie. She and Jamie are, you know, the home, each other's home and each other's place.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we get these lovely little flashbacks, little bits in there. I mean, there's some of my favorite scenes are in these flashbacks. One of my favorite scenes is the scene with the priest.
Yes.
Negotiating with the priest.
Yes.
And Willie, Bible versing back and forth with the priest. I love that scene. Mm-hmm. There are some people who don't like it, but I love it.
I liked it. I like him. They were dueling Bible verses. And Dougal looked extremely shocked. And then it took me like rewinding it and turning the volume up really, really loud before I ever noticed what Dougal said to the priest when he was finally done with them throwing Bible verses back and forth at each other. That made the priest, it was a bribe. And how
would you like your own windows?
Windows. That's what I thought. I kept, but it took me a little bit going back and forth to actually get that, figure out how he did talk that priest into doing that.
It's the church and money.
Absolutely.
Church and money.
They'll do a lot for windows and pews.
So yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes. And Angus and Rupert with the blacksmith.
Yes.
Bartering, going to get the ring is another one of my favorite scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I liked Ned Gowan going to get the dress.
The brothel.
He is just like his facial expressions and the way he, was almost kind of shy but eager, but shy, but he's just hilarious. He's one of my favorite characters anyway.
Oh yeah, I do love Ned a lot. Yeah, so like I said, this episode has a number of my favorite lighter scenes in it, because everything we've named is very much a lighter scene. But I love the way that the whole scenes in that room, in the bedroom, were shot. Because it's just by the way the lighting is changing, you can see the time passing. That they go from, it's much more daylight at the beginning of it, and then it ends up being candle lit, and it makes it much more intimate because it draws you into a smaller, tighter space as far as how the lighting is. And then just everything was shot so beautifully, as far as then there were parts of it that seemed like it was almost lit by firelight and a couple of candles. And just the change in the dynamic between the two of them and how they interacted with each other in the sexual component. Again, that first interaction being very much we got to do it to get it over with. And the second time being, definitely the pleasure, we're really going to enjoy this. And
then Claire kind of broadens his horizons by biting.
Biting, and then, introducing him to another, you know, intimacy that he probably, although I have a very hard time thinking he had no idea about that.
Well, he must have been truly fighting all those year or two that he was in France to not know or have ever experienced something like that. Yeah.
Because that's, it's like, wow, really? He was a soldier in France for 2 years. Really?
Yeah. He must have been a frontline soldier doing a lot of heavy duty soldiering.
But again, they took out so much of his, how much of a devout Catholic he is.
Yeah.
It made it it's a little more believable in the book just because of that, that religion and that belief. And the fact that, he was constantly, didn't want to have to confess things to the priest and all of that. So it was a little harder to believe in the show. But anyway, and then I was always very disappointed in the pearls.
I was just thinking about the pearls. I enjoyed how he gave them to her, but they were very plain. And
very much my grandmother's pearls, my great-grandmother's pearls.
Yeah, just very nondescript. So
I'm thinking to myself, well, how are these going to be so iconic that people are going to recognize them? And later on, when they're in a portrait on Ellen Mackenzie, and it's a way for her to kind of prove something. And it's just, I was like, because the description of them in the book is the fact that they're definitely freshwater Scotch pearls, but they're little rondelles, gold rondelles between the pearls. So it's not just pearls. It's not just this string of pearls.
Yeah.
So, but they wanted that visual of those pearls hanging down between her naked breasts.
I think they would have hung just as well with little gold balls in between them, too.
I don't know. I just, like I said, that was one of the things I was disappointed in.
A lot of people were also disappointed in the ring because the ring is totally different in the book.
I mean, I can see both sides because they talk about how the thistle ring is it's not unique. It's every other Scottish woman has the Highland thistle ring. But I do miss because of, it changed the whole Leary thing later on. So it changed that, but it also changes, I think it's going to change stuff in season 2 when she actually finally takes her ring off and looks at it. So that's, I'm gonna miss that. But because there are definitely 2 camps on the ring. The book readers, a lot of the book readers who are very disappointed in what they did with it, but I think there's some book readers who love it, who think that whole idea of it being made from a key is, which we'll find out later. But they like that whole thing. They like what it represents. So I don't know. I can see both sides. I was disappointed in it to begin with. The first time through, the first time I watched it, the first few times I watched it, I was disappointed in the ring. Although the story and the scene on how I got it was very cute.
It was very cute, and like you said, that was one of your favorite scenes with Rupert and Angus. Because
in the book there, he used his father's signet ring.
Yes. In
the wedding ceremony.
I liked also, and going back to one of the flashbacks, I liked being able to see a little bit of a softer side of Murtaugh when they were talking in the stables um, prior to the wedding. And he was like, Jamie was wanting a little bit of affirmation that someone that knew his mom real well would have approved of her.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to see this really gruff, dirty man become kind of soft and retrospective and thoughtful. And I enjoyed that. Of course, we'll see, and as we watch the series, one of the not so favorite parts of this series, we get to see a little bit of a softer side of him again as well. But I think it sets a little bit of a precedent of there's you peel an onion and there's many layers, and that's definitely true of Murtaugh.
Yeah, well, and it's our first glimpse of how far back Murtaugh's devotion to Jamie goes, and why he would still be pretty much Jamie's man and no other.
Yes, definitely.
So that was nice, and there's actually more in the deleted scenes if you get a chance to watch.
Okay, yeah, I haven't watched those yet. Those are my little tidbits for when I just can't see anything more.
There's a little bit more of that scene, and there's a little bit more. Just trying to think. There's a little bit more to that scene, and there's a little bit more to some scenes in the bedroom.
Oh, okay.
Two of them. But I still don't think there is the secrets not lies line, which I miss hugely from the book. I mean, it was a huge mistake for them not to put that in this show.
Yeah.
Because that was one of my top favorite scenes between the two of them.
Yeah, I agree.
So, except, they actually couldn't put it in there because they turned right around here in 2 episodes, and would have stepped right all over that, would have broken that promise in the whole Sandringham and Claire going to Sandringham, and that's, so there would have been a problem with maintaining that integrity there, but I still miss that.
Yeah.
I miss that a lot.
Yeah.
Because it carries on throughout all of the books.
Yeah, that there's that basis of a level of trust with them that you don't get in the series.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, again, I was talking about being disappointed in the pearls, but that last scene between the two of them was definitely, the most intimate connection between the two of them. So, which you give those three interactions between the two of them is what, a lot of it's what gave the whole conversation about the female gaze in this series. That it wasn't, this whole episode definitely had a different feel to it than if it had been, because it was directed by a woman and written by a woman. There was an entirely different feel to it than I think there would have been if it had been written by a man and directed. The focus would have been different.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I mean, and I'm not quite sure. I could never figure out how that ring, because in the book she didn't take off her wedding ring to Frank.
No.
At the ceremony, that was. But I could never figure out how that ring stayed in whatever it came flying out of. It was her dress. How did it stay in her dress when she took the dress off the first time?
The only thing that I could think of was I wonder if they had like little pockets sewn in. You know, you see or you hear them talk about sewing and carrying things in their skirts. And so I wonder if the bodice might have a little pocket maybe for a nosegay, some flowers, something,
Maybe.
something like that.
Maybe, because I was just, you know, having the fact that that was the first time it suddenly appeared, it was like, how is it still there?
Yeah.
How did it not go flying, you know, hours ago?
Yeah.
So, and I was so one of those who, when they had her walk up to it and her face showed up in the ring, I was one of those who was like, oh my God, that is so Lord of the Rings. That is so exactly that scene in the snow with the ring laying in the snow and reaching out for it. That is so Lord of the Rings Fellowship.
I'll just have to take your word for it. I've never seen any of the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
So.
well, like I said, it was such an iconic scene in that movie that
Oh, wow.
those of us who have seen it, we were all just kind of like, oh my God, it's Fellowship.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and I mean that ending it that way with her staring at the two rings, you know.
They
Fine.
definitely know how to get you to want to tune in to the next episode.
Yeah, well, it was a way to kind of bring us back and root us back into the reality that she does still want to get back to Frank because of what they're doing, what they're going to do in both sides now, which I was not a fan of.
Yeah.
But that's a discussion for next week.
Yep.
So anything we didn't touch on?
You know, I thought it was really odd, and another kind of ding to Dougal's character when she went downstairs and they had that scene in the little restaurant or common room in that inn where he does he kind of touch her chin or something and says, you know, pretty much, you know, yeah, you're married to Jamie, but
stay faithful.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you know, we definitely know that, or we're going to find out. We're going to find out that Dougal is not the most devoted of, you know, they haven't even mentioned the fact that Dougal's married in the series.
Yeah. Well, and he's already hit on her once when she was trying to escape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, during the gathering.
So, and I don't know if he, given his character in the books, I don't know if he is just that infatuated with Claire, or if it's just another female that he is kind of attracted to that he hasn't been with yet. I don't know if like he somewhere deep down has a little bit of feelings for her, or if it's just purely physical. I haven't decided that in my own brain yet.
This Dougal is like the alpha dog. He's going to piss on everything.
True.
You know?
Yep. True.
Going to mark everything as, you know, his territory. But
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, that particular he does come across as pretty crass.
Well, especially given that it's her wedding night. You know, he could have at least waited a couple of days.
Yeah, her wedding night, and that Jamie is his nephew. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh. Anyway.
I think we've pretty much covered it. So I think that was the only thing that I could think of.
I was thinking there was something I was thinking we hadn't even talked about, and then now it's gone. So it evidently wasn't super important.
Well, if you think of it, write it down. We'll discuss it next week.
Yeah. Sounds like a plan. Alrighty, well, next week we'll do Both Sides Now and The Reckoning. So,
Awesome.
do you have the DVDs?
Yes.
Do you have the Blu-ray?
Yes.
Or just the DVD? So,
No, I have the Blu-ray.
Do you have the extended version of The Reckoning? You have the Blu-ray
I should. I haven't watched it yet, but I should, yes.
Because I'm thinking I'll suggest people try and watch that extended version.
Okay.
Of The Reckoning, because there's maybe another 8 to 9 minutes of stuff.
Oh, wow.
Because of the scenes they cut. And they've also, things are rearranged a little bit.
Okay.
In the alternate version. So I think there are parts of it that I like better. I mean, there are things that I kind of wish they had kept in, just because, well, there's a lot of political stuff that they took out.
Oh, okay.
So.
All right. Yeah, that'll be a treat, because I haven't watched it yet. I'm trying to watch just, because I just got, I had to go buy a Blu-ray player to get the deleted scenes, because that was only on the Blu-ray disc.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they've, like I said, they've kind of been a little treat for me. So I'll be watching that this week.
So yeah, and I think, like I said, I think you'll enjoy the extended version of The Reckoning.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
There's more Jamie.
Oh, okay.
A lot of what got cut was Jamie.
Oh, then we'll probably definitely like it.
So, so anyway, next week we'll do, like I said, Both Sides Now and the extended version of The Reckoning, and then we're gonna do. I may change up. I think I may have us do By the Pricking of My Thumbs, The Devil's Mark, and Lollybrock. I may have us do all 3 of those in a block. But at some point, we're going to have to do 3 episodes again in a block.
Okay.
And I don't want to do 3 the last week, because that's too much. Those last 2 episodes plus a 3rd episode. Besides, I have to watch The Search. Wentworth and To Ransom a Man's Soul, and I can't make myself watch The Search with those 2. Those last 2 are painful enough without being forced to watch The Search along with them. So I guess we'll have to do The Watch and The Search together. Because it's either that or we do Lollybrock, The Watch, and The Search. And The Search is just so not my favorite episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's my least favorite.
I mean, the other thing we could do is put The Search and Wentworth together and do To Ransom a Man's Soul by itself. But that would mean having 2 weeks where we watch 3. We'll see. I had really planned on doing the last 2 episodes the week before, and it's the Monday before the new season starts. So it's that April 4th, I think. I think it's the 4th. Is that Monday? Yeah, so that's the plan. So, alrighty. Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for discussing with me.
I enjoyed it.
Hopefully next week Phyllis and Corey can be back, and I can go Jerry into joining us.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yep. Alrighty, guys. Anybody who's watching, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.